Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Claire Holliday, and I'm a fantasy author seeking traditional publishing. And I read, or rather listened to, an atrocious book. It was horrible. I don't have any notes about it. I'm just going to go off the dome. I finished it recently. It's called Between Hollow Places by Kingfisher. This is a public service announcement. This is a warning. This is for everyone who cares about their time and their sanity not to read this book. It was so bad. So the whole reason I ended up reading it, even though it was not on my TBR list, but I was looking for a spooky read that was also a good audiobook. So keep that in mind. Those were my two requirements that I was looking for. Because, there's a lot of really good spooky books, horror books, or books in general, but that for one reason or another have really bad audiobooks. Like the narrator sucks or the pacing's bad and blah, 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 blah. So I actually landed on an audiobook blog. So they specialize in audiobooks. They had a post for October, and it was the kind of thing where I didn't want something brand new because I don't know, sometimes I don't trust those sort of recommendations. To me, it's like, that it might be the publishing house or a marketing ploy to say that a book that dropped in 2025 is the best horror book to listen to. So I wanted something that was at least a few years older. And Between Hollow Places came out in 2020. And the blog that I found, I swear to God, said that the person was driving home from working at a library on the East Coast and that it was the most horrifying read and that she would nearly had to stop the car or break down because it was just so scary that she had trouble listening to it. It made her too scared to drive home. And I was like, wow, well, that is perfect. Oh, it's like a little over 9 hours, so an easy, quick read. Done and done. My God. My God. My God. I've never read anything by Kingfisher before. It's one of those names that I see pop up, pretty prolific and definitely famous author, but I didn't know what for. And I won't in the future. I'm not reading any Kingfisher henceforth. So you might be like, how can it possibly be that bad? First and foremost, the narrator was rough. Extremely rough. She had this way of reading that was kind of strange in pacing and in tone. Like everything was kind of sarcastic, even when it seems like it shouldn't be sarcastic. If there's a scary scene and the stakes are supposed to be really high, but you're reading it as if it's a sarcastic quip, that's going to take me out. That immediately puts emotional distance between me and the character because I feel like I'm supposed to be scared for the character. And at the very best, I feel the same fear that the character is feeling. How can I resonate with that if you're acting like, oh, this is so hilarious? It also just undercuts like, okay, she's going to be fine. She's not that freaked out. The author's certainly not freaked out. Whatever's going on is going to be okay. And she had a way of like dragging out and elongating her words. I'm gonna be at the Weird Museum today. Okay. When you go to Audible, it says this is a horror book. A horror book. It's unbelievable how not scary it is. No horror is to be found. I can think of exactly 2 scenes that are even kind of horror suggestive. You know what it really reminds me of? It reminds me of the same like tone and gravitas that a cozy mystery that like grandmas are really into, where it's like a little old lady and her cat and they have to find the jewel thief. It's that same level of writing, of plot, of stakes. The prose themselves are not incomprehensible and they're not necessarily bad, but they don't do the job they're, I think, supposed to do. If this is a horror book and you're trying to make me, the reader, feel stressed, feel afraid, feel something bad is going to happen to the characters and to this world and to the situation. It does not accomplish that. Our main character is a late 30-something, recently divorced woman who's broke, had to leave her house and her ex-husband and move back home with her grandfather, who owns a like wacky museum in South Carolina. It's mostly of just like weird collectibles, which actually I've been to those types of places before. So I knew exactly what she was talking about, where it's just filled with taxidermied creatures and bones and weird rocks and wooden figurines from quote unquote all over the world. But a lot of it is just junk, but there's just so much of it packed together. And then they slap museum on it, and you just kind of go around and you're going, that's weird. So she comes back and she's working at this museum, and she befriends the barista next door, which this author loves to let us know that this is a gay barista with as many cliche gay moments, like how he dresses so much more fabulously than me. Anyway, he and this woman find a hole in the museum wall, but when they go through it, it expands into another world. Like, this is not a part of the museum. It's a wall that should end, but it keeps going. And it turns out to be a bunker. And then the bunker leads to this other, like, kind of in-between world. Also, takes forever to get to this point. There's just so much setup in regards to the museum and to these characters that are not that interesting. They're not very well developed. They're very flat. Our main character got divorced and then has zero friends and zero hobbies and no money and a career, a long-time career as a graphic designer, but just absolutely no money, no prospects for her future. And then everyone else, from the gay barista to her grandfather, or maybe it's her uncle, but whatever, the family member that owns the museum, they're just very cliche one-note characters. And yet we spend plenty of time on them before we finally get to the hole in the wall. Then you go up the stairs, you go through the bunker, and you get the sense of bad vibes, bad vibes, bad vibes. There's also a second bunker with a dead body that they find and never, ever, ever, ever mention, bring up, or speculate on ever again. Anyway, they leave the bunker and they find this super bizarre in-between world, and there's like hundreds of other bunkers. And you might be like, okay, interesting premise. Nothing more than that. You do not go farther than that. There is nothing going on. It's frustrating how like flat and boring it is. There's mist, there's sand, there's like some water, everything's super quiet, and there's these willows. Oh my God, the way she talks about the willows, scary willows, willows, the willows. And yet nothing happens with the willows. Interesting thing is later on in the book, when she makes it back to this world eventually, the willows kind of act like they have their own agency, and they pull on her clothes, rip out her hair, trying to keep her from leaving the bunker. So you get the sense that the willows themselves are like these sinister creatures. The rest of the time she's there, she and the barista are stumbling around and they're going to these different bunkers, but they're not going into different worlds. They're not really finding anything interesting. Like, the amount of time you're just waiting for something to happen and then nothing happens, it's mind-boggling how somebody can waste this much time. The main character and the barista at one point find a weird school bus, and there is one creepy scene on that bus. That is like one out of the two creepy scenes that happen in the entire book. And it's on that school bus, and it happens, and it's a horror book. Something's going to happen, and it doesn't go past that. It's like there's a point where it's a little creepy and it starts to like tantalize you a little bit, and then it just stops. Like your heart rate maybe starts to elevate a tiny bit, and then it's done. There is one scene, and it's not even a scene that you're in. She finds a diary that's written in the margins of a Bible. So she always calls it the Bible, but she's reading basically someone's diary, someone's journal entry from another world that talk about finding this hollow space, this weird in between space. They come from another bunker. She never finds them personally. You get the sense that something bad happened to them. Her reading that journal is one of the only creepy, high tension parts. But even then, it doesn't really amount to anything other than they describe somebody's skin being pulled like a string of a doll and unraveling, and there's just like guts everywhere. That is the only point of body horror, and it's so low stakes because you read it in this journal entry. There's no sense of like, oh my gosh, that's gonna happen to her. She goes into the hollow world. She's there for like a third of the book, and then she's just back at the museum. And keep in mind, the entire time all this stuff is happening, it takes forever. And there's this weird, like, middle-age humor. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, middle-age, safe, mommy church humor, where it's not funny, but it's sarcastic, and it undercuts everything in the book. Any potential tension, gone. Because this main character, every thought she has is, I would have that to fall back on. It's just like, what? Why are you doing this? There are these light monsters that show up in the hollow spaces. She says it's like creatures, this like gray light that take up the space between branches. But there's like nothing more to it than that. It's not scary. I can't imagine anybody listening to this and being scared. It's like something I would feel comfortable lending to a grandma because you can safely know that they're not going to have a heart attack and keel over because it's not that scary. So she and the gay guy spend a lot of time in this hollow world where nothing happens, but they see the kids in the school bus and nothing happens. And the creatures that take up the in-between space, that nothing happens. They make it back home. They're just like, woohoo, we're back home. They both realize that they're sleepwalking to go back to the world. And that's creepy. But while it's happening, she's constantly undercutting it with really bad jokes. This character doesn't seem to take it that seriously. So the author's not taking it seriously. So why should I take it seriously? And then it culminates in just the stupidest, worst climax that I've read in a long time. The museum gets sent weird stuff all the time. And it got sent a weird otter carving. And she comes to realize this otter carving is the one that made the hole in the wall and is trying to get back to its willow world. And it finally just hit its breaking point and somehow was able to make the taxidermied animals sort of come alive. And it takes over this giant otter that's like 6 feet tall. She was trying so hard to make this taxidermied otter come to life, chasing after the main character. Scary. But you can hear by the way that I'm like saying those words out loud how not scary that is. So she has to go back to the willow world and she gets hurt. The otter's coming after her, but eventually gets away. And that's it. And then she spends so much time describing her and the gay barista filling up the hole. And then because she works at the museum, she was keeping track of who was sending stuff. She called the number of the person who sent her this otter carving and was like, do you know what you sent? This is I'm now realizing that I'm just spending way more brain power than I ever wanted to talking about this thing. But she calls him and she's like, do you know what you sent me? And it's just some old man. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that would happen. I thought it would be safe at your uncle's museum. And that's that. And then they fill up the hole with concrete. And she's like, and I feel like the taxidermied animals, when they came to life, were kind of trying to protect me from the evil otter carving, and I think that's pretty cool. Like, what a waste of time. Like, why did you write that? Who was that for? Who needed to read that? Even the Willow world, there just wasn't enough going on. I don't like this weird invisible creature. It doesn't give me anything to latch on to. There was 2 points where there's like sort of creepy imagery, but otherwise nothing. And it's like, oh, your big climax is that you're going to have a giant otter chase after this woman. Like, come on. That's embarrassing. And here's the thing. I think if the cover was of this like middle-aged woman being chased by an otter, and it was like a stereotypical cozy mystery cover that's kind of kooky and silly and overly bright and clearly not scary, but maybe a little old lady would be like, "Hoo, hoo, hoo," then I wouldn't be so angry at it. But everything around me, from this blog to the cover to what Audible, the genre, said it was horror, said that it would be scary, said that it would get my heart rate up. And I guess it did, in the sense that I'm now mad. I'm now very deeply unhappy that I spent any time listening to this book. The Willow world was slightly interesting, going into this weird, foggy place with just hundreds of willows that also maybe seem to move around, and all these little bunkers. And you have the Bible journal, these people from another world where it's basically Earth. And this guy like kind of has some like really weird, disturbing things happen to him. Like halfway through, I was like, man, this was probably a mistake, but maybe something happens at the end in the last 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour, something's gonna happen that's gonna make this whole thing somewhat worth it, because it's just gonna get so crazy and, scary and horrific, and it will make all of this listening worth it. And it didn't. Not at all. Man, one of also the most frustrating things was the main character's ex-husband keeps calling her. And they have the full conversation. It's painful, it's tedious, it's awkward, it's embarrassing, and it's the whole transcript, like from hello to goodbye and every bit in between. And after the second phone call, I was like, what are we doing here? Why are you making me listen to this? And my one justification was like, okay, if Kingfisher is including these conversations because she's lowering my guard in regards to this annoying, boring, tedious ex-husband. But the third time he calls, he says something really weird and really creepy, where I go, that's not right, that's wrong, that's wrong. And then, something scary happens. Like he's the one that sent the scary, spooky, evil carving, or somehow he's just involved in all these bad things happening to her, or the spooky thing somehow got to him and it's a more cosmic horror situation, something like that, then I would forgive it. But nothing like that happened. We just listened to really tedious, annoying conversations in full. So quite possibly one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. Definitely would not recommend. However, on a high note, I'm going to start listening to Nosferatu by Joe Hill, which, if the internet does not mislead me again, supposed to have an incredible narrator and being incredibly scary. Let me know if that's not true. And I've once again been misled, and let me know of any horror books, especially horror audiobooks or anything like that, down in the comments below. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.